listener production.
Hi, I'm Sacha Barbour Gatt. Thanks for clicking play on the Savo's episode of The Briefing. This morning we brought you a discussion about reproductive health rights for women in Australia. While there is always work to be done, our country is doing pretty well when it comes to the issue. The US, on the other hand, is a different story. Not only have the states had the 2022 Roe v. Wade ruling, which overturned a previous Supreme Court decision that effectively protected access to abortions, there's also been a recent decision in Alabama which has once again called into question the security of reproductive rights for women and girls. Its Supreme Court has ruled that embryos created during IVF are children, which has forced a number of clinics to stop offering the service as they try to wade through the many legal implications of the decision. So what now? What impacts could this have outside of Alabama? And what would a Donald Trump win in November mean for things like abortions, IVF and contraception in the United States? Joining me now to find out is John Sharp. He's a reporter from the Alabama Media Group. John, thank you so much for your time today. Look, what was the reaction to this verdict from the Alabama Supreme Court? Do you think people were surprised?
Yeah, it really was. There's been a lot of fallout from it. It's been striking throughout the country, the reaction on this ruling. Especially it's created this discussion, this opportunity for Democratic politicians in this country because we're in the middle of a presidential contest. And the Democrats are looking for political advantages. And they saw this, especially in the aftermath of the 2022 ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court that overturned Roe versus Wade. They saw this as kind of that fallout from that ruling. And they have jumped on this because polling shows in this country that abortion rights right now is a advantage for Democrats. So they clung onto this ruling. They said, look, this is what happens when you overturn Roe. These Republicans are taking it a step further. And it's created quite an interesting fallout, especially in Republicans. They've had to do this delicate dance ever since this ruling came out, this nuanced approach by supporting fertility treatments like IVF, versus, also making comments that they, in fact, oppose abortion. There's been a lot of attention, a lot of coverage on this issue, probably more so than a lot of things in Alabama.
Yeah, look, let's get into some of the fallout. So I guess the first big thing that happened was that a number of IVF clinics in the state had to suspend their operations. And that meant that couples who were booked in to start having transfers done, hopefully with the goal of getting pregnant, were out in the cold, and those sessions have been paused. Do we know the timeline for when services might start back up? And what are the legal implications that these IVF clinics are working through now?
So right now, the ball is in the court of the Alabama state legislature. It is a supermajority Republican legislature. They're taking up a bill right now that would provide immunity for, basically would not put IVF clinics in any kind of legal peril to provide this type of treatment. So this bill would essentially shield health clinics from any kind of potential problems with providing fertility treatments. The problem is whether or not it goes far enough for the IVF clinics. There's been three major ones that have paused their services right now.
Let's talk about the, feeling among the people of Alabama in the wake of this. Is there any anger among Republicans that this decision has been made, which has then caused IVF clinics to pause their services, essentially stopping the creation of life?
Yeah, there's been, I don't know if the word is anger, but frustration in particular and I've seen some comments made throughout the country from Republicans that, hey, we're the party that we go by a pro-life platform, and pro-life means that we want to provide life, and IVF does exactly that. So we need to fix this. So that's kind of where things are at. But the Democrats see this as, hey, we're going to pin you up against the wall and see what happens on this particular issue. Because on a national standpoint in Congress, we had Senator Tammy Duckworth she rolled out a bill that basically granted IVF protections nationwide and wanted unanimous support from all members of the U.S. Senate. And it was actually a Mississippi Senator that came out and did not vote in support of it. So this bill is not the right way to go about doing it. So, there's been a political fallout on this. Yes, Republicans are citing frustrations, but the Democrats are saying, what are you going to be doing about those frustrations? How are you going to codify those frustrations in the law? And that's kind of where we're at right now.
Let's talk about the religious aspect to this. I want to quote Chief Justice Tom Parker in his concurring opinion. He said, he quoted scripture saying, quote, "Even before birth, all human beings bear the image of God, and their lives cannot be destroyed without effacing his glory." How much of this decision is rooted in religion?
Well, that came from the Chief Justice's his ruling. The other rulings within this decision did not have that heavy theocratic biblical citations within it. So this came from one Chief Justice. This is, kind of his background in he's been very, very religious in previous rulings. So this is not anything new coming from this individual. And the other justices on the state Supreme Court did not provide any rulings like this. So this is the one that caught a lot of attention. And it's created alarm in other parts of the country that are seeing this and saying, this is not appropriate separation of church and state issues. And but in this state, Alabama is a very conservative state. It's one of the most, in the past, it's been labeled as one of the most religious in the country. So it's not overly surprising to see this type of ruling come out from our Chief Justice.
So it's nothing new. Look, let's talk about the politics of this, which you've already partly touched on. Do you think it's going to create a really contentious line of debate throughout the presidential election race?
It seems like the biggest issue early on in this campaign is the age of the two candidates. A lot's been made by the Republicans of President Joe Biden's age and his health. Similarly, it's come back around and it's been something the Democrats have used on Donald Trump. But we also have issues of immigration. That's going to be a big one on the campaign trail. It already is. The economy will be big. National security will be big. But yes, women's health and reproductive health will be one of those. I think it'll be a bigger issue in this election than it has in those previous ones, because of the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling in 2022 to overturn Roe versus Wade.
Well, John Sharp, thank you so much for your time today and for explaining the ramifications of this decision. Since we spoke to John, a major development came through and we've got him back on the line now to find out what it is. John, thank you so much for speaking to us again. Can you explain what's happened since we last spoke?
Yes, so here in Alabama, the state House of Representatives and the state Senate both advanced identical legislation late in the evening here in Alabama that would protect IVF providers and their employees from civil lawsuits and criminal prosecutions over the destruction or damage of an embryo during the transfer process. And the governor signed the bill, so it is now law. This was fast-tracked legislation. It is signed, sealed, and finally finished. It has gotten a little bit of reaction here today. Well, I would say a lot of reaction. We've had 2 of the 3 IVF clinics that had put their services on pause after the state Supreme Court ruling last month have since resumed their procedures. Either here today or into the weekend, they'll start resuming. And that's kind of where we're at right now in Alabama. There is one clinic, the one that's at the subject of the original lawsuit, and they have not resumed their procedures. They believe that the legislation that was approved does not go far enough, and there is a lot of discussion still on what else should be done by the state legislature as it goes to the definition of an unborn child, whether or not Alabama needs to define personhood in its state law.
Okay. So the story that I read about this kind of seemed to suggest that while there is this protection that's been signed in, it's not all-encompassing and there are still a lot of questions about it. So has the legislature signaled that it's going to do more or go further with this?
Yes, they say they're going to look at a long-term fix, but this was viewed as a short-term fix to get these clinics up and going and providing them immunity from any lawsuits in case of any situations involving the transfer of embryos within an IVF clinic. So this is viewed as a short-time fix. Where we go long-term, we don't know yet.
Okay. Well, questions remain. I suppose it is positive for the families who had been waiting to access IVF. You know, they'd had things booked in and they were able to, two clinics at least, have lifted that halt on services. But yeah, it is a messy situation. We appreciate you giving us this update and keeping us informed of it.
Thank you.
That was John Sharp, a news reporter from Alabama. And that's all we have time for today, but there is so much more to come over the weekend. Tom Tilley will be back on Sunday with a great chat with Wendell Saylor, and Antoinette is here tomorrow. Antoinette, what do we have on?
Hey guys, on the weekend briefing, I chat with dog lover and former MAF star Claire Varel. Such a roller coaster of a chat. She had me in stitches, in absolute stitches, as she shared a Taylor Swift superfan fail moment, which I think this is a fail moment like no other. But I was also incredibly saddened as Claire revealed the devastating toll being on reality TV has had on her life. So honestly, it is one of my favourite interviews. You won't want to miss it.
Sounds great. In the meantime, get in touch with us on Insta at The Briefing Podcast if you have any feedback or story ideas, and make sure you have a lovely weekend ahead. My name is Sacha Barbour Gatt. Thanks so much for joining me.